following the first panel on standards and the second panel on corporate action, we will now move into the exciting part of our program, which is our workshop. So we have written a letter to COP representatives that we will bring to COP29 in Azerbaijan, Baku. So what is this about? So many of you probably have joined some of our webinars in the past, where we basically had some kind of reflections about post-COP actions in terms of Scope 3. And unfortunately, after COP was always like, but actually in Scope 3, there were nothing or maybe very little elements discussed during COP. So for that reason, this year, we decided to take a bit more active approach. And that's why we decided to write a letter to COP representative based on all the recommendations, takeaways, and elements that we have been building on all this year. So why now? Well, basically because governments are now asked to submit the new batch of NDCs, which is going to be from 2025 to 2030. So this is our opportunity, right, to first of all raise awareness on the key role of Scope 3 emissions in COP negotiations. Bring them all the informations about the challenges beyond Scope 3 that we have been gathering and hearing from companies, from standards, and from many different organizations. And lastly, provide robust recommendation to the public sector. So this letter is actually a call to action to really increase the urgency among Scope 3 discussions and demand bolder actions in terms of net zero value chains. So, so indeed, we will not reiterate that Scope 3 emissions have an extremely crucial role, and eventually reduction cannot be considered individual responsibility, and we need a comprehensive framework to really tackle sector and cross-sector level emissions. So eventually governments play a crucial role, and a couple of governments have come to the VCI to knock at our door. What do we need to do? What can we do? How can we help companies? And so here we go. So we have created and shaped these 6 recommendations areas that we have been drafting within the letters. And here are the 6 recommendations. So enhancing the understanding of the importance of Scope 3, the policy environment, designing effective incentive structures, and also, of course, trust and credibility. We also heard a bit before from Ryan in terms of Scope 3 investment, and then strengthening Scope 3 ecosystem and the collaboration between Global South and Global North. So these are the 6 recommendations, and what's going to happen is that we will all divide into 15 groups, and each group will discuss one recommendation. This is the last hour, and so we are going to go into the breakout. It's going to be kind of 40 minutes, so we will all get to work and all get to kind of really use our brain, and following all the discussions that we have been hearing, really help us really co-create and validate the recommendations that we have been building so that we can present them to COP. So really shout out to all the moderators that really are helping here us today. So we have 15 groups. You have your name tags. In your name tags, you can see your numbers. You have a small sticker in each name tag, and there you can see where you are. So now I would like to ask you all to stand up and go to the location where you are assigned. So on the right side is going to be group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then on the left side is going to be group 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And group 13, 14, and 15 will be outside. Thank you so much for the hard work, and I hope you enjoy the discussions and really co-creating the recommendations. So I would like to call those that discuss recommendation 1, maybe some representatives from recommendation 1 on stage, maybe to share back some of the discussions. Yeah.
I was confused because we were group 7, but recommendation 1. So I was like, no, that's us, that's us. All right, so quickly. Our recommendation is enhancing understanding of the importance of scope 3. So what we defined was that the target group for that recommendation is governments, so the parties of the Conference of the Parties. And so we believe that indeed it's the recommendation we need. We need to enhance governments or parties' understanding of the importance of scope 3. And there's a number of things that we think are required to do that. First is that maybe a good angle to bring the scope 3 conversation at the COP table is to make governments realize that scope 3 is a way for them to leverage private sector money to finance their NDCs. Because if they can get corporates to invest in scope 3 on their sort of territory within their borders, that will drive emission reductions and climate impacts that will count towards their scope 3 targets. So it's basically leveraging private sector finance. So that's how we can create a hook to get their interest. And then in terms of how they can help also enhance understanding of scope 3 within their own economies, we think that there should be a call to have government public funding to help SMEs access the data and the tools they need to engage with scope 3 reporting. And then we also talked about this issue of traceability and chain of custody, which is a big pain point. And so we started discussing the fact that governments could help tackle that. But then we took a step back and we were like, maybe we need governments to help standards get together and agree, like soft power, like political power, influencing standards to solve those issues and maybe making sure those standards are financially sustainable as well and independent could be a role for government in the scope 3 space. That's what we covered. Did I miss anything? Good, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Anyone from recommendation 1 that would like to add anything? No, I think we have covered lots of points. Silvana, yeah? All right, so we go into recommendation 2. So I think it was the group of Naomi, Jane, and Ying. Not sure if you guys managed to discuss. Yeah, Jane.
Hi, everyone. So we had recommendation 2, building a policy environment supporting net zero. There was some broad agreement with the recommendation. And I think in general, making it more specific was something we talked a lot about. In terms of 3 steps, having clear timelines for net zero sector strategies or policies, including when policies will be implemented, when companies need to act. Clarity like that. I think clarity is a clear theme today. We talked also about being clear on the definition of net zero, and I think we had a whole discussion around that. And then lastly, considering measures or allocating resources to get companies that aren't working yet on scope 3 to just get started, and what can governments do to play a role to do that? Anything I missed? My awesome group? Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, so we go into recommendation 3, which is incentive structures. Anyone? Discuss recommendation 3. I think Christine?
No, here.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. The recommendation 3 is about designing effective incentive structures. And basically the issue at stake is that it is estimated that $1 trillion need to be reallocated from high emission to low emission assets. So the 2 recommendations were basically for the government that should basically design tailor incentive systems. And the second one is that incentives should be designed to resonate with private and public investors. We have a very interesting conversation. We agree with those 2 recommendations, but what we're really missing here is that on the incentive systems, farmers should be at the very core of that strategy. We're missing that element. 80% of the agricultural world, we're basically talking about small, medium farm sizes. So we really need to think about that. And talking about the 3 steps, specific steps, the first one is really about creating positive incentives. So when we're talking about incentives, every supply chain or any supply chain with good quality data and traceability in place should be a priority for those incentives. The second one is about collaboration. If some collaboration is in place, if some of those industries know how to allocate and deploy those resources, those industries should have a priority over the other ones that don't have that. And the third element is about farmer data. We're all talking about farmer data, and of course, farmer data is going to be key. What is really, really important is to understand and to make sure that farmer data needs to provide benefits back to those farmers. And I'm not talking about having some feedback back to those farmers in a year from now. We should try to think about systems that can actually, because the technology already exists, so we need to think about how we can provide some feedback to those farmers, ideally in real world time.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Rodrigo, and thanks to the group. So indeed, what type of incentives are the most driving incentives and the role of farmers and data? I'm not sure, yeah, Kristen? Well, also some other interesting discussions.
Okay, yes, we also had 3. So to start, we had some issue with the issue at the top. There was a question about the framing, of whether moving from high emission to low emission was really the goal, and we talked about some examples where that might not be really what we're after. So I guess some caution there, and some questions about what we mean by governments. So is it intergovernmental, is it national government, is it lower government? But then moving to the actual recommendations, I think generally we agreed with the recommendation that yes, there's a role for governments and incentives. Most of our discussion was about what is an incentive. And it went everywhere from the fact that there's a role for governments in providing good data, and that in itself would be an incentive to act, or governments in supporting companies to get into a position where they can act, so some of the building your data systems, that kind of thing. Trade, financial tech, etc. So many different things that could be an incentive. And then on the point of being attractive to, I think it's at the finance sector or the second one, that yes, an agreement that the way you structure the incentive, if it's bankable, then it can be used more broadly to leverage more resources. Yeah, I think that's it. Anything else? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So what is the definition of incentives? That's a great question. So from incentives, we go to investments, and that will be recommendation 4. Thomas, will you? Sorry? You are also recommendation 4? Okay, then you can, oh yeah, you can come on stage and share.
Okay, group 4. We also had some questions around investments and what type should there be? Should there be regulation or incentives? And we had some of those questions as well. Overall, I think we agreed with the recommendation, yeah. But then we had some specifics where we wanted to invite companies to actually deeply understand scope 1, 2, and 3 in corporate accounting, and what type of accounting is actually happening. We had a long discussion about sort of the transnational nature of supply chains, and how we could actually, governments could help create broader alignment around standards and MRV in the space to allow for more comparability. Maybe that needs to go towards product level conversations, but does it was a big question as well. A lot around the overall jurisdictional approach, looking at how governments need to invite companies into the NDC and help them understand what their contribution towards that is. And even those that are transnational, so if you are a company in Europe that's sourcing from Southeast Asia, or those Southeast Asian countries need to invite those companies into understanding what their contribution needs to be in the countries that they're sourcing from, and also creating public-private partnerships around those investments, as well as the research that needs to be done around what is working and what types of investments need to be made. So that was what we talked about. Did I miss anything? No? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting points. And there was also another group. Lisa would like to. Thank you.
Yes, so some of this will be a bit repetitive, but we also talked about recommendation 4. We think that governments might not be best positioned to design these guidelines and policies and frameworks, but they are the ones who can really enforce them, so they have an important role to play here, can add a lot of value. We think that we need neutral, non-country affiliated bodies to design standards like GHGP and SBTI. But as mentioned, governments should support with enforcing this, implementing this, and also aim at getting alignment on governmental requirements and the requirements from these different bodies. What else? We didn't get so far on these steps. We said one specific step that a government could typically take is to adjust the Tier 1 capital ratio required for green funding. So if you reduce that, the funding cost would be lower for a green loan. Collaborate with private sector and different existing initiatives around this to build on that. And I'm throwing in carbon border tax as well.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think multiple tables were discussing about the carbon tax. But interesting to see how actually the role of the standards with governments and then all the other actually incentives that actually can drive investments, right? And kind of loans and green loans and so on. Great. So we go to recommendation 5, the Scope 3 ecosystem. Karen, thank you so much. And Fletcher. Great.
Okay, so we merged because I only had Tim from WWF in my group, so we collaborated. Okay.
Indeed, sure. So there seems to be a little bit of a theme because we started with questioning the recommendation itself. Strengthening the Scope 3 ecosystem seemed a bit broad, we felt like, since the focus is really on technology and innovation. So I think starting there with just calling out more specifically, looking at the role for technology and innovation in the conversation. But to go from there, we do feel like government definitely has a role here, and maybe switching up the priorities as they're listed here, because we feel like before any level of education can go on when engaging government as to what the technology and innovation landscape looks like, we should really be engaging them first. So that means bringing them into forums that are already going on, whether that's technology or innovation based, to get them to be a part of the conversation. That's going to uncover the opportunities for their role, but also maybe highlight the opportunities in general for tech and innovation. And in turn, the last piece of that is this should also help with this idea of what can they then enable from a technology and scale technology and innovation standpoint when we look at scale. So an example along those lines that we brought out as where government stepped in with a solution, but maybe if they had been more plugged into technology and innovation, the outcome could have looked different, and that would be the Climate Smart Commodities program, because while the funding was fantastic and the goals were fantastic from an impact perspective, you have tons of different disparate technologies as a result. And that's from a data perspective. That's from a potentially, what does it look like for people claiming those outcomes and the like. And then also that topic of data and traceability too, I think you said.
Yeah, I think, you know, the two challenges that were identified in the word diagram, puzzle, phrase, were data and traceability. So keeping those in mind, what could the government do with its policy levers? There's lots of different policy levers governments can bring to the table, and they are an important collaborator. And so with their policy levers, what could they do? Is it procurement programs? Is it other threads that have been talked about, knocking base points? Could they bring in an insurance program for permanence? You know, shared with industry. Infrastructure for monitoring. And then what speaks here with data and traceability being the two challenges is, okay, well then how do we start to build out MMRV systems with government assistance that can help to bring together and align that kind of collaboration in the various value chains that are being put on the ground. So those were the things that came to the fore. And we really feel like this community, to address the second question, how can the VCI enable this reality? I don't think there's a better group of people who have been struggling with the challenges and trying to get these solutions, you know, developed and surfacing the gaps, just to be able to bring governments in to understand that would be very good, because sometimes their outcomes are not the same as the corporate world outcomes, and we need to make sure that's aligned.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both. Yeah, it's really interesting how the data and technology providers eventually play a role, and the kind of the infrastructure that we should build, and governments can, you know, play that kind of role to ensuring all of this is happening and all of this is aligned and connected. Great. So let's go into the last recommendation, which is Global South, Global North. Any group have discussed this? No? We missed? Oh, yeah, great. JD, come forward. Thank you.
So yeah, we were talking about collaboration between the global South and North, and you know, a number of the themes that came up were similar to what was talked about with some of the other groups, notably kind of traceability and incentive systems around there go the lights again. Unifying emissions regulations and accounting. So I think one of the things we were thinking about, like many probably in this room have for a long time, is moving towards something like globally accepted accounting principles in the financial world, and helping enable that for carbon accounting as well. But one of the things we got into a little bit more specifically around this was data collection. And I don't know who in this room has worked on supplier engagement, especially in the Global South, but some of the challenges that you deal with. So how do we then help support governments provide resources and training to enable the farmers to actually benefit from entering into these, you know, really partnerships with the supply chains they're a part of, right? So that was really what we were looking at. And how can VCI support that last point? It's like we've all learned a lot about this, and how could we support governments in really our lessons learned on what, well, and also collaborating with folks on the ground in the Global South to be able to find the resources and the training that's needed. So.
Thank you. All right, great. So this was the last recommendation, last but not least, because it's definitely an important point, and especially in the apparel working group, we have deep diving into the kind of Global South, Global North collaboration and all those topics. So thank you all so much. This was great. I hope you found it valuable. So what we are going to do, I'm going to ask all the moderators to drop us an email with some insights that you got from your groups. We will integrate those feedback, and we will basically work into an updated version of the letter, and then we will release it. You all have received the letter. It's in your inbox. You can read and you can submit further comments if you like. And then you can also support the letter by uploading your logo, your signature, and really share your interest in joining this campaign towards COP29. And yeah, so thank you all so much for joining this workshop.
I think, well, thank you, and thanks for staying all the way until the end. So now we're moving into the drinks. Let's walk the talk, and basically, please, if you want to know a little bit more about the work, if you want to engage, if you want to respond to our calls for engagements, let's talk, let's exchange some emails, whatever you want. And well, big thank you, I guess. So.
Yeah, we would like to give a huge thank you to the Sustain Cert and VCI team, especially Lea. I'm not sure. Yeah, you are there. Thank you, Lea, the event manager of Sustain Cert. Thank you, Lea. Without you, we wouldn't be here. And of course, Lily, Kitty, Michelle, Naomi, and Mariana. But also the event location, the AV team, and everyone behind the scenes that made this event possible. But also, big round of applause to all of you for all the collective efforts today and the great conversation. So thank you so much. Yeah. So before we move into the drinks,
thank you to our amazing hosts. Thank you, Francesca and Silvana, for putting this event together. Thank you.
So we will move into the reception drinks, but before we do that, I'm not sure if John Byrne is here. Yeah, great. So we would like to thank 3 Degrees for sponsoring the reception drinks. John is, they're our sponsoring partner, but also member of the Food and Agriculture Working Group and members of the VCI. And John leads the global agriculture strategy for 3 Degrees and helps finance and develop agriculture emission reduction projects. So, John, you will share some words with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone from VCI. Thank you so much. I've been at many of the events over the last 2 days, so you all must be exhausted. So I don't want to stand between you and the drinks. So I just want to say thank you. I run the global agriculture strategy for 3 Degrees. We believe in credible, defensible, but also realistic approaches to value chain interventions. And that's why we're just so happy to be supporting Sustain Cert and VCI. So thanks, everybody.